Today, South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham proposed what would be the first ever nationwide abortion ban. It would drive a stake through the heart of the last vestiges of Roe v. Wade and federalize the anti-abortion right-wing politics of the Supreme Court.
We should have a law at the federal level that would say after 15 weeks, no abortion on demand, except in cases of rape, incest, to save the life of the mother. And that should be where America's at. I look forward to the debate. I look forward to the vote. If we take back the House and the Senate, I can assure you we'll have a vote on our bill.
This bill, if passed, would make the same type of abortion ban that was actually at issue in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health. That's a Mississippi law that was at issue in that case. That's the case that the court used to get rid of federal abortion rights. It would make that Mississippi law effectively the law of the land. Keep in mind, up until now, Republicans, including Lindsey Graham, have been insisting they wanted Roe overturned because the right to an abortion or abortion restrictions should be left up to the individual states.
The point I'm trying to make is I've been consistent. I think states should decide the issue of marriage and states should decide the issue of abortion. I have respect for South Carolina. South Carolina voters here, I trust, to define marriage and to deal with the issue of abortion.
But apparently he doesn't have trust for, I don't know, the voters of California or Kansas or Minnesota or New York, because now Graham's reversing course. And it's easy to see why. Republicans are facing some pretty bad polling on abortion. According to a recent survey from the Wall Street Journal, 60% of voters think abortion should be legal in all or most cases. That's up from 55% in March. That same survey showed the ruling in Dobbs made more than half of voters more motivated to vote in midterm elections, and you see that's mostly weighted towards Democrats and independents. That's why Lindsey Graham is trying to energize his own party's anti-abortion grassroots while attempting to tip the debate back towards what he thinks is more favorable terrain. But make no mistake, he is introducing what would be an unprecedented federal abortion ban. If you're living in Michigan or Pennsylvania, states that currently have access to abortion, this ban would come for you. Same for California, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. It means no matter what state you live in, abortion is absolutely on the ballot for November. For more on the Republican plan to ban abortion, I'm joined by Senator Amy Klobuchar, Democrat from Minnesota. She serves on the Judiciary Committee, and she joins me now. I suspect I know where you are on this kind of legislation, but I will ask you if you think this kind of thing is a good idea and whether it would get a single Democratic vote.
It would not. And I want to make clear for your viewers here, it is actually abortion ban immediately in many of the states because it is a 15-week ban in states that haven't put anything in place except to follow the Roe v. Wade precedent. In the other states, 12 of them don't even have exceptions for rape or incest. That would remain, Chris. So basically, he's allowing the states that have already banned abortion right away to have that stay in place. And then all the other states, like Minnesota, which is an island along with Illinois in the Midwest, they would have to follow his federal ban, which is at 15 weeks. And I mean, it is much worse than it sounds just when you say 15 weeks.
Yeah, and it wouldn't obviously, so it wouldn't preempt those state laws that are far more restrictive. What do you think about the political reaction that we've seen? I mean, it was really fascinating to me today. Graham comes out. He wants to make a big show of this. Tom Tillis says, well, I'm really thinking about inflation and the railroad strike. And Mitch McConnell says, I don't really want to talk about it. And everyone comes running away from it almost as soon as it comes out and gets mad for anyone covering it. What does that say to you?
Well, a lot of people want to distance themselves from it, that's for sure. But I think it's really important to know that difference, even for those candidates out there that say, oh, I wouldn't support what Lindsey Graham is saying on the Republican side. The question of them is, would they put Roe v. Wade into law? Would they correct the Supreme Court reversal of 50 years of precedent to simply say women should be able to have the freedom to make their own decision about their health care and not have Ted Cruz in the waiting room and not have politicians make the decision. That's what the candidates have to answer, because no matter what they think of Senator Graham's proposal, none of them, as far as I know, on the Republican side and running for Senate here, they are all extreme when it comes to abortion, and they've been very clear in order to get the endorsement of their party that they actually would not allow for the Roe v. Wade protections for women's health.
Yeah, I know in your state, obviously, abortion is at the center, abortion rights at the center of the gubernatorial race in that state. Your state, which I think is fair to say a pro-choice state in its sort of public opinion and its laws at the moment. I mean, one of the things I think that Graham illustrates is that when you combine this with a recent cert petition to have the 14th Amendment find a fetal personhood, right, constitutional right to life for, a fetus, that obviously the end goal here is total nationwide abortion ban of the movement that brought us to this point. It seems crazy for anyone to think otherwise, unless you think I'm wrong.
No, you're right. That is exactly, Mitch McConnell himself has said that that's where they're headed. That's what they would do if they took over the U.S. Senate and the House. And people should make no mistake about that. And that is why you saw the voters of Kansas turn out in droves, 500,000 of them, more than the total that even voted at all in the last midterms election, to be able to uphold women's right to make her own health care decisions. It's why you see those races in Alaska and in Hudson Valley in New York. You saw the results there, Chris, and that is that people are voting that we didn't expect to vote actually before. And then you add to that the celebration we had at the White House today, the fact that Democrats have the backs of the American people. And that means bringing down the cost of prescription drugs, something I've been working on since I got to the Senate, leading the bill for negotiation. We finally took on the pharmaceutical, Big Pharma, and said you've got to be able to allow for negotiation, or took on investment in climate change, or the name of the bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, brought down the deficit by $305 billion. Those are all things where Democrats are actually making very clear, whether it's for the burn pits, for our veterans, we have people's back. So you contrast that with their extreme, and then you contrast that with our awesome. I just was with Mandela Barnes, our candidate in Wisconsin. We have some incredible candidates all across the country.
Set.